Um, so good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, a collaboration between Recruitment Training and Support Center, or RTSC, at the Federation for Children with Special Needs. I'm Mary Beth Landy, the Senior Trainer, Recruitment and Support Specialist for Western Massachusetts, and I will be moderating today's webinar. I would ask that if you have questions that you put them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to them as we go along. If you have other issues, concerned about technology, if you could put that in the chat, that would be great. First off, I would like to welcome today's webinar guests speaking on transitional support for youth in foster care with Kristen Quinlan, who has been a pleasure to have multiple occasions. She always comes when we ask. And Anne Maria Tormes, that is also working with Kristen. So they will be here answering questions about transition in DCF or from DCF for students in DCF care. So hopefully you're in the right place and you have lots of questions. So again, we will do, would you like to take questions as we go along, or would you like to do them in the end?
I can do questions. I think sometimes it's helpful to do questions as we go along. So I may pause at the end of each slide if there's questions around it. You can mention, or you can interrupt me too. I like to have that interactive piece still going. Yep. So I have no problem doing that, so that we don't have to go back. But I can also take questions at the end if people want to hold them.
Okay, great. So I'm actually going to ask both of you to give us a brief bio, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump into the presentation.
Sure. Anna, you want to go first then?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Maria Tormes. I'm one of the education and training specialists at DCF. I am based at the central office, but I work with all area offices across the state. Kristen is my supervisor, and I am here mainly to observe, but my work is really kind of with the day-to-day post-secondary needs of our foster youth.
And I'm Kristen Quinlan. I am the adolescent program supervisor out of central office. I supervise the post-secondary educational programs, the credit and fiscal literacy programs, along with our educational and employment housing programs. I am connected to the outreach workers that sit in every area office as well. I've been with the department for 20 years, doing primarily transition age and post-secondary work with young people ages 16 to 22. So I've also been a worker in the field as well with Anna. Anna has been a worker too, so she brings some of that clinical experience with her. And I supervise both Anna and Lori, the ETV workers who focus on post-secondary education. I've done these trainings before, and some of you may be familiar with my name and or voice, and I look forward to trying to get as much information as I can out there to you today.
Great, thank you. So whenever you're ready to start the presentation.
I'm going to try to share my screen here.
Okay.
So let's see if I can get that done, because it's a guide for me. And I just need this to go up a little bit to start. Why can't this little piece, I want to do it from the beginning. All right, can everyone see that?
Yes.
For those that are there. Great. All right. So again, Massachusetts Department of Children and Families, my name, and I actually am education training supervisor now, so I should update that slide. But I just wanted to start off with talking a little bit about before senior year and talking about what happens with the young people who are in DCF and some of the different programs that we have and the messages and expectations that we're sending out to the young people who are in transition. We have a young adult readiness assessment tool that is required for all youth in Congregate Care, ages 14 and up. And Congregate Care is a higher level of care. So those are those IFC agencies or those group homes. They are the residential facilities, things to that nature. All of them are required to complete a youth readiness assessment tool, and that identifies long and short-term goals for the young person specifically around education, life skills training, shopping, bank accounts, employment, permanency as well. And one of the things I like about this youth readiness assessment tool is it identifies who's going to help support that young person. So for instance, if a young person was looking at going to college and one of their goals was to complete the post-secondary application, it would identify who is going to help them with that particular task. Is it the social worker? Is it the guidance counselor? Is it the educational surrogate parent, things like that. So it will identify, and it replaces what many programs have used in the past as an independent living skills assessment. And this is a little bit more detailed. It speaks very much to transition planning, and is required to be updated every 6 months by the provider and should live in the social worker's case record. Okay.
Could I ask when would be a good time? When is usually that process started?
So when a young person goes into placement, they need to complete the provider. So for instance, if a young person was placed in a residential home, with JRI, the JRI program would be required to complete this young adult readiness assessment tool within the first 30 days of placement. And then they update. It's an ongoing working document, and it's reviewed every 6 months, but it is an ongoing working document. And it should go with the person from one placement to the next. Outreach workers who work with young people in foster care also complete this, but it is not, like I said, it's required for those who are in congregate care. So not necessarily in a DCF foster home or a kinship foster home. You may not see this being done unless they're working with an adolescent outreach worker.
Okay, great.
I should say the tool itself isn't being physically completed. The steps are still being done. The life skills training is still being done with the young person. It's just the physical tool isn't being done. Okay. Great. PIA is another one. We do life skills necessary to sustain a young person's education. The life skills curriculum that we use is preparing adolescents for young adulthood, which is what PIA stands for. And every young person 14 and older is required in placement, in congregate care placement, or in placement in a foster home, is required to do 2 hours of life skills training a week. And that includes, like I mentioned earlier, budgeting, housing, transportation, education, employment, and even grocery shop and things like that. So all young people are required to complete 2 hours who are 14 and older in placement. So we do a lot of that training along with the youth, and it falls along in lines with the youth readiness assessment tool. And so we determine by using the assessment tool, you can highlight where the young person's strengths are and what their needs are, and then work the life skills training through PIA to support them in where they need to improve or make improvements. Because everyone is at a different place in their life, no matter what age they are. Some 17-year-olds are looking at housing and post-secondary messages around employment and renting an apartment, and other ones are looking at post-secondary options and FAFSA and living in a dorm. So it's identifying and tailoring these life skills and the training to their specific needs. Okay.
Great.
That comes back to the post-secondary messages and expectations. What is DCF's post-secondary messages and expectations? What are we telling our young people that they need to do? College is not for everyone. Vocational training is out there, right? Employment, some young people are not ready to attend a 2-year or 4-year school. It might be a CNA program or a vocational training program, or it might just be working, and maybe it's working part-time because that's all they can do. The young person does not need to remain with the department post-18 and have to go to school. They can take a gap year or two. They could be just working and improving their work skills to be able to sustain themselves when they become an adult. Every young person is different. So I think that has to be something that, has changed, and we've been changing over the years. The expectation used to be that in order to sign a voluntary with the department, you had to be enrolled in school. That is not the case. However, we all know that, education and vocational training or improving certain skill sets around managers and employment needs to be done to, be able to afford living and things like that. So what kind of messages and expectations are we sending out to our young people? We're having these conversations with them when they are 16, 17, and 18 years old. What do you want to do when you turn 18? Is it go to college? If that's what it is, how can we help you get there? If it's not, is it going to a 2-year and transferring to a 4-year? Is it doing vocational training? So these are conversations that we are having that with them, as well as with the Youth Readiness Assessment tool and PIA. Okay. The other thing here is I just wanted to put a little brief in on pre-SATs and SATs and just put a reminder out to people that the young people in DCF qualify for a waiver for those costs through the school. So guidance counselors have a code that they can use for the College Board SATs, and they enter it in, and all of our young people qualify because they are in the state's custody and meet low income, and I believe they can have 2 for the lifetime while they're at school, and it pays for their pre-SATs and their SATs and allows them to send a certain amount of, I believe, up to 8 free to institutions. Okay. Some people don't know that. So it's not a waiver that goes through DCF, it is a waiver that is through the high school and the guidance counselor. Okay. So the next thing I just wanted to speak to is making the right decision. Again, coming back a little bit to the post-secondary expectations, their readiness, right? Their social and emotional needs. Someone who is, struggling with some PTSD or some, depression and anxiety may not be the best candidate to go live in a 4-year dorm. Maybe it is continuing in their foster home or in their current placement and taking a couple classes. A young person who has recently, gotten their GED or their high set is someone who might not be ready to go to a 4-year school. Maybe it's taking 1 or 2 classes at a 2-year school because they haven't been enrolled in classes for some time. And the commitment and the discipline that they may need to attend a full-time 4-year school is very different than what they may have been experiencing in the last couple of years. So it's important to explore their academics, figure out where they're at academically, and can they sustain their education in a post-secondary placement or vocational training placement. Research the colleges and schedule tours. This is really important as well. We work with our young people to talk about what types of schools to go to, city schools, rural schools, large schools, small schools. And a big thing we talk about is cost on return on investment. It's important that our young people understand what it costs to go to school and what their return on investment is going to be at that particular school. We do a lot of financial and fiscal literacy and planning with our young people, talking to them about loans, talking to them about income and what a degree can, bring them versus an associate's degree versus a bachelor's degree. Sometimes taking a look at the cost of a bachelor's degree and maybe putting a little bit more focus on a master's degree if that's where they want to have their loans. So we do a lot of, it's not just a 1-year plan. We don't meet with some people when they are a senior and say, let's look, what does your next year in college look like? We're really taking a look at what their next 4 years looks like and what they can take from those 4 years and apply as an adult. And again, we go back to the vocational versus college and what, best fit for them. And we speak to career assessments and career centers. We work very closely with the one-stop career centers around the state and trying to get young people different assessments to figure out where their needs are, what their specialties and interests are as well. And we work with them to identify different types of employment opportunities, resumes, and employment interviewing as well. Any questions, Mary Beth, as I kind of...
I don't have, they specifically don't have questions. I do. One of the things that I think is important, and we always talk to our surrogate parents about vision statement and really working with the kids from a young age. Even if you're in 5th grade, you still can have an idea of, vision statement as to what you'd like to do. So I think that there's an element of that being so important. Yes. That they're developing that as they go along, and it really starts to give them some idea. I think that the different assessments that you do, particularly around what, if they're looking post-secondary, what it is that they'd like to do and how the steps they need to get there.
Yes.
would definitely be important. So what I'm wondering is how much correlation is there between what an SESP does on an IEP with transitional planning? Does that information make it to your staff to help them guide?
So what you're asking a little bit, Mary Beth, is a little hard for me to answer, but I'm going to answer it in a general, because remember, I am part of the adolescent and young adult transitional support unit, right? So I have outreach workers that sit in every area office. And we carry a caseload of 15. So I work specifically with young people, with 15 cases a week. They see them once a week to provide support and training on PI and life skills. So when I speak to my staff, those are the ones I'm going to refer to versus the social workers who are the ongoing caseworkers, right? So my staff, if they're working with them on an individual basis and meeting with them once a week, is that information getting out to them? My staff do meet with guidance counselors around post-secondary and education and planning. My staff do attend IEP meetings when necessary. So I can tell you that information, if it's being shared by an ESP or an educational surrogate parent or the guidance counselor of the school, that is absolutely getting to and we take that into account. We're very big, and actually, as I kind of go through this a little bit more, you'll see I'll speak a little bit more to that. We're very keen on making sure that they have their IEPs up to date. We know that those need to, to be transferred to post-secondary education and contacting the Disability Services Department, and we're hand walking the young people that we're working with in there. When I speak to the social workers, I am going to tell you that I can't speak to every social worker. What I can speak to is that, adolescent social workers are, and Anna Maria has been, more recently a part of this team working, and she's had some adolescents she's worked with as well. They are attending IEP meetings. We can't, obviously, and you guys know we can't sign an IEP, but we can make suggestions, and we are taking that information into account when doing transitional planning with these young people too. So, and that it kind of piggybacks a little bit on that youth readiness assessment tool, right? Because we need to know what's in that plan for them, and oftentimes it may mirror or be helpful when doing their IEP or their transitional plan through the school department as well. And my hope is that people are looking at both of those tools to determine what's in the best interest of that child. So because I think they both offer a lot of helpful information, because we know the schools are with them every day and they see them every day, and the teachers and the guidance counselors, and we see them a little bit differently, but we can speak a little bit more sometimes to those social emotional needs, to their clinical history and their academics. So they really do need to be working together to make sure that it's a successful transition plan. So I hope that answers your question. I can't really say that it's getting every single person, but it is our job to make sure that we're asking those important questions when we're going to those meetings.
Yes, and I think that is one of the things that we've talked about, is that how important your program is, because the kids in Congregate Care don't have the access to community resources. They don't have the access to, it's not like the group home goes, sure, you can walk to CVS by yourself and handle those things. And I think that what you're working with them on is helpful.
Yeah, and I see, and that's hard for the providers as well, because everyone is looked at case by case, and and they're taking into account what the particular needs are of that young person. And so some group homes should be allowing more of that community time to that young person. And I don't want to, get off on a segue here, but I do think that it's important that if you are working with someone who is in a residential facility or in a group home, and they are looking at transitional support, and you think that they're not necessarily being heard or getting things that they need to do, I would recommend reaching out to the area office outreach worker, because that outreach worker would still know who that person is, even if they're not working with them individually. My outreach workers, they're working with all of the young people who are in there, right? So in that particular office, they're working. Just because they carry a caseload of 15 does not mean that they're not going to make sure that the other young people in the office have access to things like a tuition and fee waiver, life skills support, which I'll talk about later, discharge support, things like that. So if you're working with a young person, I think a good way for you to be able to know what types of things are being offered, or if they're familiar with it, would be to say, has this young person been in contact with the adolescent outreach worker in the area office? And if so, what types of support are they receiving from them? And that would be a really good way, as one of through the people that you're working with, to be able to help that young person be able to access different supports if they're not getting them at the placement.
Okay. Brandy has a question, so I'm going to allow her to go ahead and let me see if she typed it in the. No, let me allow her to ask her question. So Brandy, I'm going to let you speak and you can go ahead and ask. You'll just have to unmute yourself.
Brandy, I did the same thing.
Sorry about.
Whoops. There you go.
No, I apologize. I accidentally hit that button. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So Brandy, you had a question?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
All right. I do have two questions in the queue. So let me see. If a student has been in the care and custody of DCF and placed in foster care and then adopted from foster care, it did not take advantage of post-secondary education and having their tuition covered for a state school, can they access financial support later in life as an older adult?
So adoption is a little bit different, and I'll talk, I don't have, so adoption, a young person is eligible for an adoption tuition and fee waiver up until their 25th birthday. So if they chose at the age of 19 or 20 not to go to school, but decided to return at the age of 22 or 23, they can still access the adoption tuition and fee waiver until their 25th birthday. After their 25th birthday, they would not have access. They could still apply for one. The schools wouldn't take it. They wouldn't honor it because the statute says up until the 25th birthday.
Mm-hmm. Which I have, as a parent of two adoptive daughters, I so appreciate that tuition and fee waiver. One of my daughters is at Bunker Hill Community College, and so thank you for that tuition.
Oh, you can thank young people. They're the ones who, through our advisory board, advocated for themselves to have this waiver and brought it to legislation and had it put into place. So our young foster youth are the ones who are responsible for that waiver, and so I think it's a great opportunity for them.
It really is. And Janet has a question. She would like clarification. At what age does DCF stop supporting a youth in their care? And if the youth does go to education after high school, does DCF pay for this?
Oh, that's a loaded question. So I'm going to speak a little bit. I'm going to come back to that because I want to see if I answer those two questions as I move along in my presentation, because I will speak a little bit about how long a young person can stay in care. And if I don't, I will at the end. And the educational piece and the costs and will we pay for it? Again, I'll speak to, because it is very specific, it's very case specific around eligibility. And so what I tell people is nothing is free. There's an application process for everything. There is an approval process for everything. There's also, when people ask if I pay for school, there's also, is there academic progress? Do they qualify for the Fafsa? So there's lots of moving pieces. And so I don't feel like that question can really be answered. Can we and do we help assist young people with post-secondary financial? Yes, we do. Can it be covered completely? Often, but not at every school. So I'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. Right. Okay. So again, transitional support, here's where I just want to kind of circle back to the young adult readiness assessment tool. It captures educational career planning and information and assists in identifying supports for post-secondary career goals. I can't emphasize that this tool enough that if you're working with a young person, you should be asking to see if this has been completed and what steps have been done to do. And there, I think that their school, it'd be helpful when attending those IEP meetings, because it's going to identify where they've already, what skill sets they've already worked on, where they are currently, and where they need to still highlight and get additional support. We do focus on high school transition plan for youth on IEPs. Those last meetings were really putting out the words here to make sure that young people are aware that they need to have their renewal through their senior year, that they can take their IEP with them to post-secondary education. We're connecting them to the disability support services on campus. And Ana Maria and Lori Hernandez are two of my workers who work with the young people once they are enrolled in post-secondary education. And we are often referring them, or if a young person is struggling academically, if they're struggling connecting to and networking on campus, which I think is huge, a young person, in order to sustain their education, really needs to be able to connect to that school and develop relationships, peer and adult relationships on campus. And so we're trying to set up some different things for them on campus and connecting them to those people. But even more so, if they're struggling academically, you know, one of the first questions we're asking is, did you have an IEP in school? What is that IEP? Where is that IEP now? And have you access to support services on campus? And then we're guiding them through that process too.
Great.
I would like to just say real quick on this slide as well as the DCF area office has, when a young person is placed in Congregate Care, there is a education coordinator out of the area offices that young people should be reaching out to make sure that they're getting the services that they need from the different LEAs and the schools and things like that. And so that ed coordinator is pretty skilled and educated around how those different pieces fall into place. I am not. But those are very specific to youth in when I say Congregate Care, again, those residential placements, those group home placements. And, you know, my outreach workers are doing it more for those young people that are in kinship placements and foster care placements and things like that. So if you have someone who is not getting their needs, I would encourage you to reach out to the social worker. And again, that ed coordinator could be really helpful in identifying additional things that they may need and how to access them too. Okay.
Great.
Just really quick on the application process when it comes to post-secondary. And I just want, the reason I'm bringing this up and kind of going a little bit more detailed around this is because it's really important that the young person understands what an application process looks like. And, you know, like you had mentioned, Mary Beth, you know, this starts early, right? It's not something senior year, all of a sudden we're saying to them, like, let's go to school. Like, it does start early. So requesting those brochures and applications, I like to say, think college early, you know, 7th grade, like, you know, if they know that they can go to school, that they can afford to go to school, that they, you know, it's going to be a motivating factor for them, right? So we're motivated when we have something in front of us that's obtainable. And so I think requesting brochures and applications and taking a look at them as, you know, very early on is good. So here for the application process, you know, when it gets into the senior year, it's really important to pay attention to deadlines, apply early. You know, deadlines are very important for youth in foster care. It can mean thousands of dollars in financial aid just by missing a deadline. You know, a complete application includes a form, an essay, picking the right question for our young people. I've had institutions tell us that they have been between two young people, and because their essay was so powerful with the experiences that they've had and the perseverance that they've had to overcome some of the trauma, that they've gone with our young people. So picking the right question is really important, and telling their story in the right way is also really important, mm-hmm. and getting some help. I've had some people tell it in the right way as well. So that's where reaching out to us and talking to your teachers about it can be really helpful. Recommendations, again, picking the right person, you know, coaches, teachers. It shouldn't always be the social worker. It should really be focused around academics and your community-based activities, letting them know that you are involved in the community if you have any experience in the community. Scores and transcripts. And then the other piece would be the admissions fee waiver. So this is different from the tuition and fee waiver. Not all schools will take it. There isn't an actual fee waiver for an application. Sometimes some schools, mostly public, will waive the fee to an application if there's a letter from the social worker explaining that they are in the care and custody of the department and to please waive the fee, or the guidance counselor as well. With that, I will say that it requires follow-up. So sometimes I've had young people who said, but I haven't heard back from you know, Framingham State. I'm just giving an example, and I have to remind them, did you follow up? Because the one piece that's missing is the fee that they didn't pay, the $10 or $20. And so they're not going to reach out and tell you, we didn't accept your fee waiver. You need to follow up with the school to see if it went through, because it can hold up an application if they didn't do it. And the last one is completing the FAFSA, which I will talk about next, because I think there's lots of questions around the FAFSA oftentimes. So.
One of the things that I think is such a gift to have these supports is because these are the kids that don't have a parent behind them saying, did you fill out your FAFSA yet? Is your application done yet? Is your, the bugging the kids to be able to get the applications done and things like that. I think this is so important.
Yes, I agree with you, Mary Beth, and it's really hard, right? Because I don't know anyone on here, I can't see anyone, but in completing a FAFSA, right, is not easy. For anyone that's actually completed one, it's not easy. And so asking an 18 or 19-year-old, 17-year-old to do it on their own is difficult. And so there are people that can help with it, and there should be people helping. And that goes back to that youth readiness assessment tool when the goal is to attend a post-secondary education, and the steps to do that is, a short-term goal would be complete a FAFSA. The next question on there is who's going to help them complete that FAFSA, and that way that person's held accountable for that step. So when it's not done, we can refer back to it and say, you said that this is the person who is going to be helping. So that's really, it's a very key point. Like you said, they don't have young people to help them. It is very overwhelming. It's overwhelming for adults. So my 18 to 22 population is certainly in need of it as well.
Yes.
So just real quick, what types of aid can they apply for? And most of you are familiar with this. The federal, free application for federal student aid. Here's the website, the fafsa.ed.gov. It's really important that young people use this particular website because it doesn't cost money, and they shouldn't be paying for their FAFSA at all to go to schools. And I will say that the FAFSA requires an FSA ID, and there's a verification process for, through the Social Security Administration. And so sometimes I recommend that happen. It takes 1 to 3 days for them to verify their Social Security and and their identity of who they are. So I always say kind of like, let's fill this out first. And then next week we'll go and fill out your FAFSA when we have your identified PIN and you've been cleared through the Social Security Administration, just so there's no hiccups later on.
Mm-hmm.
High school guidance offices have local scholarships and school aid. So you can always contact the financial aid office at your schools that you're considering. So schools have their own institutional aid as well. They have merit scholarships, they have presidential scholarships and dean scholarships. And so I always advocate to my young people to reach back out to the schools to get any additional aid that they may have through their alumni association and things like that. Especially sometimes, when I get into the qualifications, young people may qualify for certain scholarships that DCF has to offer, but might be short, like, $500 or $600 or $1,000. Like, I'll guide our young people to reach back out to the school to see if they can get additional aid through the school based, on the fact that they are low income, given their situation, that they are an independent student. So I always encourage them to self-advocate for the institution as well.
And I also, I think that there's times that for a lot of these kids, they may be first gens going to college. And that is financially a benefit, and also in the acceptance process, they're viewed at a little bit differently. So not to hesitate on that, because there are scholarships available for first gen students as well.
Yeah, and I've done some, and again, depending on the schools, right, too, like I know Westfield has very specific scholarships, for youth and foster care through FACES. They have ones for inner city and urban youth. So again, it's doing some research, and there is a local agency by the name of American Student Association, or ASA.org.
Mm-hmm.
They're in downtown Boston, and I believe they just opened up in Brockton as well. I'm not 100% sure. They also may be collaborating with Mass Ag Po recently, but I'd have to, don't quote me on that. But the reason I bring them up is because they do some case management as well, and they also help, and they have additional information on different financial supports for young people in post-secondary education, and they don't necessarily need to be involved with DCF to do so. This is for any young transition age youth. And They have an array of services too, so I would, a little plug for them.
Great, thank you.
All right. So just to go on, so the FAFSA must be completed by all foster youth. Deadlines are even more important. You can take advantage of existing resources. I work very closely with MIFA, Massachusetts Education Financing Authority, and they do different FAFSA days, and they can help with applications, and they do a lot of help around. I do trainings for them as well. And actually, we just did a webinar for guidance counselors. So we work with MIFA to get our information out to guidance counselors across the state. So from those webinars and the in-person trainings that I do for them, we have gotten, we've been able to network with different schools that attend, and we often get calls all the time about adoption tuition and fee waivers, foster care tuition and fee waivers, how to fill out a FAFSA for an independent student for someone who might be in foster care. So we're doing a lot of work with them as well. And that's where that network and collaboration with them has identified some of the different supports that someone may need. When you, Mary Beth, we were talking about, do we connect and have any of this information on IEP? This is where we're making some of those connections and identifying what is in the best interest of the young person, and is everyone on the same page when it comes to. So it's great when we're able to get involved, because we're one step a little bit more about with the social worker, right? So the social worker is doing some of this planning with them around post-secondary education, and then the guidance counselor reaches out to me, and I can kind of say, yes, this is great. This person is eligible for this, this, and this, and I'm going to connect with the social worker to make sure the social worker has the correct information. And then we're networking back with the guidance counselor to make sure that everyone is on the same page and holding meetings together. So it's a lot of that as well.
I do have a question from Emily.
Yeah.
Before you move on. Does DCF do any collaboration with the Boston Center for Independent Living? I ask because I'm doing an internship with them and am learning about a wide array of services they offer for young people with disabilities, including vocational support, assistance with locating housing, healthcare, and etc.
So I don't know. I myself have not done any collaboration with them. I'm very interested in getting more information, and I'm going to ask that Anna write that place down so we can look into it a little bit more. But I'm inclined to say that if it is an agency that provides support for young people with disabilities, our Boston workers have probably connected with them at some point, our adolescent workers. And Jill Bulger is the supervisor for the Boston region, and I will speak with her a little bit to see if she's familiar with that particular agency. And I would love to, chat with you at another time after this about what they provide, because I think it could be helpful on both ends for us as well as for you. So if you're doing an internship and that young person wants to just put their contact information in the chat, Anna will take it and we can reach out to them.
Sounds great.
This is an important slide for you when working with young people and when we're working with schools to make sure that they're completing this correctly. I just want to highlight a couple different places. When a young person is filling something out in foster care, there's 3 places that they can check off. One was I was in foster care since turning age 13. The other one was I was a dependent or ward of the court since turning age 13. And I just wanted to specifically talk to these 2 first and let you know that the difference between this. And this speaks a little bit to that adoption person, the question around adoption as well. I was in foster care since turning age 13. So that means if a young person was placed in foster care, that includes Congregate Care, because the way the federal government looks at foster, it's an umbrella. Foster care is an umbrella term for placement. So if they were in foster care from 13 to 16, and then they went home, they can check this off on the FAFSA and they can still be considered an independent student. They may not be eligible for the DCF programs, but they're eligible to be an independent student with the institution. And the institution would ask for additional documentation of that, and we could provide that with the dates of placement, and they would then determine whether or not the student would be considered independent or if they would need their parents' financials on the FAFSA. Okay. This is also for those young people. So if a young person was adopted after the age of 13, so say they were placed in foster care from 13 to 14, and then they were adopted, an adopted parent may not have planned for their education. And so this would allow them to check that off and be considered an independent student and not include the adopted parent's financials on the FAFSA. If they were adopted prior to 13, this would not pertain to them. Okay. That is different than I was a dependent or ward of the court since turning age 13. This is pretty specific to those young people who are in the care and custody of DCF at the age of 18 and were a ward of the court through their 18th birthday. They can check off either one of these. If they're in our custody at the age of 18, it's just cleaner to check off I was a dependent or ward of the court since turning 13. Okay. And then the last one here is I am currently or was in a legal guardianship. So if somebody is, if somebody was in our custody and then was placed in a guardianship placement, they can check that off. And this is both a DCF sponsored guardianship and or a guardianship through probate. We could only provide documentation to support the DCF sponsored guardianship. They would have to get documentation from the court if it was through probate.
Okay. All right.
This slide, I'm just going to kind of keep going. This just kind of talks a little bit about what I just spoke to and gives you a little bit more clear of a definition. On the FAFSA, this is another area where we're able to connect with young people in care. If they check that they were in foster care at any point in time, they are connected to the state ETV coordinator, which is myself and or Michelle Banks, and they reach out to us and we're able to identify if they are eligible for any additional post-secondary education support from DCF. The verification process after the FAFSA, this is really, really important. And this is, Mary Beth, where you spoke a little bit about just the FAFSA and being able to, not having someone to be able to help them fill this out. It gets even more complicated after just, people oftentimes I'll get those phone calls, well, I completed the FAFSA, I'm all set, I have financial aid. Nope, you don't. That's just step one in the process. So the verification process is something that is done after. And this is really important, again, when you're working with providers and when you're working with community partners, that there's someone helping them, because this is where there's oftentimes dropped or miscommunication. A young person fills out the FAFSA. It is really important for the young person to check their emails. A lot of things are done electronically now, and or their mail for additional follow-up. The school is going to ask for verification of information that they provided on the FAFSA. One of those is going to be a ward of the court or a foster care letter, and that is information that DCF can provide. We can do a letter to support them and give it to the young person to bring down to the school. The next thing is going to be an income verification, and the income verification, if they filled out the FAFSA, there's a piece called the IRS data retrieval tool. If they use that, they should be all set. Our young people often move, and so if they didn't file taxes, they're going to need what we call a non-tax filer form. But if they did file taxes and they moved and they weren't able to use the IRS data retrieval tool, they're going to have to show proof of income and that the information they provided on that FAFSA form is accurate. And so they're going to have to request a tax transcript through the IRS. I have had schools, and it's not easy to do. It takes at least 10 days to get this after the request. If a young person has requested it and the school hasn't received it, they will not award them. So this has to be done through the IRS website, on a phone call, picked up at the IRS office. So it's really important that they follow. And if you're applying for a school and you fill out the FAFSA, I'm encouraging people to just go ahead and request that IRS tax non-filer form and or tax transcript right away, because I can guarantee you the school's going to ask for it if you didn't use the data. The next part would be the independent status, and again, it's called an independent verification form, and they have the student fill it out, and it's typically specific to the school that they're going to, so there's not a general one. Salem State has their own, Bunker Hill has their own, so it's important to keep an eye out for that. They typically will send you a link to that form. And then the proof of residency is another one. They're going to ask for a license or an ID or two forms of residency to ensure that you are a Massachusetts resident.
Is that a challenge for kids with multiple placements and moving?
The proof of residency?
Yeah.
It's usually not, because the school's proof of residency is a little different. Like they will, like a high school diploma that shows they graduated, as well as a letter from us or a mass ID or a doctor's form can be done. So they're just really looking to say that they live in Massachusetts, that they didn't just move here from New Hampshire to escape like paying in-state tuition. That's really what that is. But with that said, Mary Beth, you bring up a good point, because some of the young people we work with don't have, for residency is different than legal status, right? So there are young people who do not have a legal status here yet in Massachusetts that are open with DCF and are in the process of working for it. And all of our programs are specific. You must have, a specific legal status. And so we follow the letter of the law with the FAFSA. And so if they're eligible for the FAFSA and have residency status, legal status that qualify for the FAFSA, then they qualify for our programs. But if someone is here on like a work visa and they're awaiting their SIJ status or they're awaiting their permanent resident card, it can really hold up their eligibility with us as well for some of our post-secondary programs.
Okay, yeah, I'm thinking of unaccompanied minors particularly.
Yes. And we work pretty closely with them, and in my trainings that I do, and in the different, I'm working with social workers and working with, and this is another place for guidance counselors, right? So oftentimes some people are really nervous to tell their DCF worker that they don't have legal status because they're afraid of maybe getting deported, or they're, so schools sometimes know before we do that they don't have a legal status. And so I always ask that if they know that they're not legal and they're 16, 17 years old, to let us know, because we'll identify that and reach out to our legal people to try to start that process. But we can if we don't know. Right. And it's a lot harder to do once they're 18. In fact, it's nearly impossible to do once they're 18. So if we know about it sooner, sometimes it takes years to get nowadays.
Yeah.
So, and we work around some of those. We do a lot of case consultation around some of that stuff. And sometimes we can help, sometimes we can't. So just again, read letters and email. That's my big red flag here. So just real quick, because just for purpose of time, types of DCF custody, we have our permanent custody, which is through care and protection, our CRA custody, which is a child requiring assistance. Like I spoke to earlier, adoption before and after 13. It's really important to consider that when looking at transitional planning and what services and supports are available. Guardianship placement, and then voluntary placement post 18. So we have some people who are in our custody, who are not in our custody, they're in our care before the age of 18, and that's through a voluntary placement agreement or a care and responsibility. And it's important to note that that's not custody. We also have what we call a post 18 voluntary placement agreement. And this speaks a little bit to the person who was asking me how long a young person can stay in our care. A young person can remain open with the department until the age of 22. Or 23 if they're pursuing a higher education degree and they have approval from a director of areas. A young person can choose to close at the age of 18, 19, or 20, and they can go and try to go out on their own. And if they are doing well and successful, that's great. But we also know that young people sometimes, just like with parents, decide they want to go out and it doesn't quite work the way they thought it was going to. And so they can reapply for voluntary services through the age of 21 and remain open with us until their 22nd birthday.
Great. I have two questions. Are you ready? You want to do them now, or do you want to wait? So Janet would like to know who at DCF is the primary support for transition tasks for students in Congregate Care ages 18 to 22 who are in need of independent living skills and employment readiness skills.
So who's the person that is responsible for teaching them those skills, or who's the person responsible to making sure that they're receiving the life skills training that they need?
I'm going to assume it's who is responsible to make sure that they're receiving those.
Okay. So again, if they are in the social worker is doing clinical treatment plan meetings and clinical case reviews with the provider. The provider is responsible for ensuring that the young person is completing life skills training, okay? If the provider is not doing that and they are in a congregate care, then that would be an issue to bring up with the social worker, as well as the agency, I'm blanking right now on the agency who is like Wayside. Like, so for instance, like out of the Arlington DCF area office, it is Wayside who manages the contracts, right, and works out with the different providers and holds the clinical treatment reviews. And so for me, if I'm working with someone who is 17, 18, 19 years old, and I'm noticing that they are not working, that they're not going to school, that they're refusing to meet with the person, I'm going back to the wayside and saying, who's holding this provider accountable? So it falls in the social worker. And the reason I had asked about whether it's who's providing that is the social worker isn't walking out and meeting with these young people and saying, providing the life skills training on an ongoing basis, right? However, a social worker could go out to a monthly meeting at the age of 19 if they're like, I have young people who are living in their apartment, they're going to school, they're going to college, they're working. And my monthly meetings are focused around what's working well for you. Are you able to pay your rent? Are you going to school? Have you been, applying for jobs? Tell me how many jobs you applied for. So that life skills training is built into those monthly home visits. And if there's a need that arises, the social worker can guide them around that. If they're working with a provider like a youth villages or a community partner or a congregate care provider, it's their responsibility to ensure that that young person's needs and life skills training is being done.
Okay, could you just speak to what a pre-independent living home is versus a congregate care?
Pre-independent living home would be considered congregate care. So when I say congregate care, right, it's any contracted agency. So the reason outreach workers meet with young people who are in foster homes and kinship foster homes or receiving young adult support payments is because we're paying a provider, a contracted provider to provide that service. So a group home, a residential home, a pre-IL, an independent living program, they have, or even specialized foster care, they have a caseworker or a case manager who meets with that young person at least once a week. There's clinical treatment plan meetings, there's a clinical team that we're contracted to provide that service to the young person. So the social worker works with them to make sure that these things are being done and that they're being provided life skills training, that they're being provided certain things, but it's the provider who's responsible for doing that. So if the provider is not doing that, it's important to bring that up to the social workers.
Okay, great. And I have one more question. Do you have others to wrap up, or should I ask the question?
I was just going to go into a little bit more specific. So let me finish up. That way, if people have to go, I can answer the questions that are there. But because I just have a few more slides to go through, but this just repeats that we can assist with the proof of custody status or the voluntary award of court information if necessary. The different financial supports, this is really what I kind of wanted to hone in on because I think it's important for people to understand. If you are looking for eligibility for one of these and to determine eligibility, I would encourage you to reach out to the area office social worker, okay? And or outreach worker. The outreach worker can do case consults, and both my ETV workers, Anna and Maria, can help with this as well. So the different programs we have is the foster child tuition and fee waiver program, the adopted child tuition and fee waiver program. We have the Massachusetts Foster Child Grant and the ETV program. The William Warren Scholarship is one that I reserve for those who may not meet the eligibility for one of the programs I mentioned above it. Because it is limited resources and it's only awarded to 5 people a year. Okay. So tuition and fee waiver, real quick. Eligible youth are in the custody of DCF until the age of 18. They have not yet turned 25. They were adopted or guardian. This waives the cost of tuition and fees to state-supported classes only at Massachusetts public institutions. So it does not waive fees to non-state supported classes, which sometimes can be offered at satellite sites or online or night classes. The school would know what classes are state supported and which ones are not. Mm-hmm. We certify eligibility. When a person applies for this, they apply to Lori Hernandez. They provide me a copy of their Mass ID and or birth certificate. I take a look to see if they qualify based on being in our custody at 18, if they were in a guardianship, adoption, and then I give them the tuition and fee waiver. It is the responsibility of the young person to bring that tuition and fee waiver to the institution. If they don't, the institution does not know that they're eligible for it and they will not receive the tuition and fee waiver.
And do they have to do that every semester or just
They
upon?
should, just one time. And if they go to the school for the full 4 years, they should not have to do it again. If the school tells them otherwise, they should let me know.
Okay.
But if they transfer schools, they will need to be able to take that to the school, to the next school that they transfer to. Okay. Massachusetts Foster Child Grant is another one. This is very specific to DCF protective custody. When I talked about those custody statuses earlier, the student needs to be enrolled full-time. This can be used at both Massachusetts public schools or private schools. And it can also be used in state or out of state. Okay. It's about $3,000 a semester is what the Massachusetts Foster Child Grant, depending on funding, comes out to be. Education and training voucher. This is something that we do in-house. The other two programs, we certify eligibility, but the Department of Higher Ed pays them and they manage the two programs. The education and training voucher is specific to, we certify eligibility and we manage this. Anna Maria, excuse me, does this all year. And so this is for youth who are in DCF custody until age 18, not able to return home. They can apply up until their 26th birthday. If they were adopted after the age of 16, they're also eligible for this, or if they were guardianshipped with kin through DCF, they're eligible for this. So if a young person was guardian through probate court, they would not be eligible for this. And they must have a high school diploma or GED. So just like any of our programs, they have to be eligible for the FAFSA and receiving financial aid from their school, or else they're not going to be qualified for ours. And so that's really where that satisfactory academic progress comes into play. And so just to speak a little bit about what the person who had asked earlier about if we finance, if we pay for a young person's school, if they're in our custody at age 18 and they're going to someplace like Bridgewater State College and they qualify as an independent student, they're getting the most financial aid through the FAFSA. They're having their tuition and fees waived. They're getting foster child grant if they're in protective custody, and then they're getting ETV. So it's likely that young person would be going to Bridgewater State and have minimal to zero loans for the 4 years that they go to school, if they meet all the eligibility requirements for our programs, versus someone who may be going to Suffolk University, where they would probably have loans and a cash balance, even with some of the support that we have. So again, it's about making an informed decision. It's about educating our young people and how to make an informed decision, and about educating our young people on how to, you know, what loans are, what grants are, things like that. And so again, I talk about, we do a college fair every year. This year we, due to COVID, unfortunately last year and this year, we weren't able to do it. We did a little virtual info session instead, a college readiness info session. We typically do that in April. We do educational open houses at area offices every year in February. And we're able to work with social workers, foster parents, young people. This is, we invite them to come in and ask questions around eligibility, talk to them about where they're at, what their transition plan is. We do education and training support like this one. We also do it with MIFA, and we work with different community partners and providers to make sure that they have the correct information as well. My two workers go out and do advising days once young people are in school to connect them to different financial aid staff, student support services, admissions and housing, and we also connect them with each other. We're trying to get an advisory board up and going, actually, you know, with young people from across the state to be able to support each other around campus. And we're hoping to have, and I think that we talked about having one in June, correct, to do that. So we're trying to get that going. It's new to us. We had a couple small campus ones, but when COVID hit, you know, they kind of, you know, weren't able to be done anymore. So now we're trying to get one virtually to be able to get that up and going as well.
That's great.
Yep. And so just real quick, what can you do? Help identify foster youth educational support. Who is it that's helping them? You know, and reach out to us and talk to us a little bit. Help them, you know, review and compare award letters, understand, like I said, a difference between a grant and a loan. Talk about financial planning for short and term long goals, and compare costs, and reach out to us for existing support that can help students at your schools or the students that you're working with at different schools. That is really what I mostly have. This last slide I thought what would be helpful, because one of the things you spoke about was transitional support. And so just, I know I spoke a lot about outreach workers throughout this, you know, presentation and the importance of them. And I do want to just make sure that people are aware that there are outreach workers in every area office, with the exception of Cape Cod right now, we're hiring them. And so they are really your key to making sure that the young people you're working with have the information that I talked about today, as well as knowing what they're eligible for. We have things like life skills support, which is funds and finances for different things like computers to apply for those college applications, for those SAT prep courses, for employment or bus passes, for things like that. So the other thing we have is that I talked to you about the advisory board that we are trying to start up for post-secondary ed. We also have a joint youth advisory committee that are held regionally. So if you have a young person who would like to take on a leadership role, they should reach out to the supervisor in the region to see if they can join their advisory board. We have discharge support for young people who are 18 to 22, and they could be eligible for some funds towards the cost of housing when they leave care with DCF. And we also have the Immersion Futures program, which is an internship program that we have through DCF. And it's not an internship with DCF. What it is if a young person who is looking to maybe become, say they wanted to go into, I don't know, be a vet, they could reach out to local communities, veterinarian, and see if they could volunteer and do some work there, and we would be able to help give them, pay them to do so. If you had someone who was, wanted to go into childcare, they could reach out to the local childcare, and if they were able to allow them to do an internship there, we could pay them, and I believe it's about $12 an hour, and we usually do anywhere between 40 and 80 hours. And what's nice about this is it can be done. We can meet the young person where they're at. So if they can only do 4 hours a week for 10 weeks, then they can do 4 hours. If it's 10 hours a week for 4 weeks, we can do it that way. So it's really meeting the young person where they're at.
That's great.
Just real quick on here, because I know we're running a few minutes over. Helpful places is DCF Alumni Network Connection, or Mass NFCA is a really good way to help people connect. Just a reminder, Mass Health for young people who are 18 at the time of placement and close with the department. Mass Health continues until 26. Here's that asa.org is that agency I spoke to earlier about the post-secondary education and planning and resources, and Mass Hire is another place we go to oftentimes to take a look at employment opportunities for young people.
Great.
And with that said, contact information, and I can take questions.
There you go. So the one question that we're still holding on to is, does DCF have a laptop, cell phone with the phone plan? How can students track and complete their communication responsibilities?
I don't know if I understand that question.
So I think, when we talk about they need to be able to be on top of emails coming from the schools when they're applying to colleges, things like that. Yep. It's not like they have the family computer to be able to work from. So is there a program where they can access or get a computer or a cell phone to be able to do that?
Yep. So that life skills program I just talked about, if they meet the eligibility requirements, if they're in our custody and in placement, and again, a lot of what I spoke to about today is about young people in DCF custody and placement, and they meet the eligibility for that, then they can access a computer through life skills support. They can also have funds towards a phone. With that said, we don't like to just give out money all the time. We want to work with the young person. We want to build their skills, right? So we want to make sure that, if they're working, how much are they contributing? Or, do they have a bank account? Are they saving their money? So we want to work with them. And so a computer, yes, like a cell phone, am I going to go buy them a cell phone? I may help them towards that cell phone if they are working and employed and doing what they need to do, but I'm not going to pay their monthly cell phone bill. Because what I would expect is that, if I got you a cell phone, then you're going to be working and helping towards that cost too. And again, based on age and appropriateness and, things, there's lots of different things that come into cell phones, and cosigners, different things like that. So, but computer, yes, we do have programs. Rise Above also helps out sometimes with young people who need a computer or certain things that when DCF can't. So there's different ways. But yes, we can help with that.
Okay, great. So I really want to thank both of you for being here. It has been really informative. And I think that it really clarifies for our SESPs as well as other providers who are on the call exactly what are available and how this the outreach workers work. And so thank you for joining us today. It is the mission to make the difference in the lives of our children. And I think, you know, that is the mission of both of our agencies. If people are interested in continuing the goal of helping children, please consider becoming a special education surrogate parent for a student in the custody of DCF. If you can find more information and information about our role at fcsn.org/RTSC. You'll be receiving a follow-up survey, which we ask you to complete, as the information is valuable to us as we plan future webinars. Again, ladies, thank you so much for your time and energy and everything that you provided for us today. Kristen, you're always wonderful. So thank you for saying yes. So, and that is it for us today. Everyone have a good day, and we will see you next month. And next month will be Jim Morrison from DCF. The education manager will be joining us. So look out for registration. Excuse me.
I was going to say he's one that, when I was speaking about some of those ed coordinators in the area offices and that, you know, secondary educational stuff, he's going to be able to be really helpful around that.
Absolutely. So, great. All right. Thank you, ladies. Have a good day.
Thank you so much.